To get started, I wanted to set the stage of how I was drawn to the colleague that I chose to have my conversation with. I started in a new school this year, and early in September, as we approached Orange Shirt Day, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to get a feel of where our school was at with our understanding and teaching of residential schools. It was evident that this was going to be dismissed as unimportant work due to the lack of knowledge around this history. I encouraged my colleagues to join me at the blanket exercise on our PD to help build some context. On our drive home, one of my colleagues made the joke, "Wow, I must have missed that day of university." I actually thought, holy crap, do you live under a rock? It irritated me to think of how ignorant Canadians are and have no care to even attempt to understand this history. I knew this conversation needed to happen and that my colleague needed to help to recognize that it's her own responsibility to learn these truths. It's terrifying to think that this dismissive attitude is one that will be echoed in her teaching in the schools which happen to be the schools that my own children will attend. This gave me a sense of urgency. A month and a half later, and here we are ready to sit in this tension and have this conversation. I could sense the devil's advocate attitude walking into the room. Talk about being privileged to feel that you can defend your standpoint on a topic that you know so little about. I opened the conversation asking if she knew what the TRC was. She felt like she had heard about it before, but could not identify what it was or its purpose. I shared with her what it was and what the TRC aims to achieve. I could sense some guilt in her not knowing what it was. I feel that it's shameful that a teacher who is supposed to be part of sharing truth and working towards reconciliation had no idea what the work is and what her role is in this work. Our conversation sat in truth for quite some time, which didn't really surprise me at all. It was quite evident that there was a huge misunderstanding of the severity and the duration of residential schools. I could sense shock at the beginning of our conversation around some of these truths. There was evidence in our conversation of some knowledge that she had. She was not clueless to the fact that this happened or that these schools existed, but did not fully understand the goal of the schools to assimilate these Indigenous kids. I just question why there's no intention to build on what little knowledge she already did know. I sense the "it happened so long ago and it doesn't affect me" attitude. I share that yes, it feels like it happened in the past, but it's our country's truth, and as Canadians, we have to begin to understand what truly happened in these schools in order to understand how this continues to impact us today. This isn't the past, this is our present reality also. I could sense a new layer of understanding and empathy when we worked through some of these difficult truths as we began to think about this happening to our own children. Spending time in that place of truth really made me begin to think about the level of understanding that the average Canadian has about the brutal history. The majority of Canadians have no formal education on this, so it made me begin to consider where their understanding comes from. It really made me think about the myths in Indigenous rights. The so-called truth that the majority know are the racist narratives that are continuously presented in the media that build on the already white narrative that they have been presented in their own schooling. It is that same continuous narrative that Indigenous people are inferior and broken in all ways. The narrative continues to be so whitewashed that the general public does not have enough knowledge to connect the dots between the present and the residential school's history. The second half of our conversation heavily revolved around the "so what is it that they actually want? Why is it our responsibility now if this was in the past? And at what point does this just end and everybody get over it?" This part of the conversation is loaded, and I realize that I still have work to do to feel 100% comfortable in having this part of the discussion. I worked at trying to help her understand that the past and the present actually can't be separated in this. There's no point in time where Canada just got its shit together and actually started dealing with the issues that happened in the past. They actually continue to happen today. I addressed her comment when she stated that she feels that at some point everyone needs to get over it, and I pointed out that once again that's expecting them to assimilate and thinking that making them more like us will fix the situation. We discussed how reconciliation isn't something that will just happen and that it's something that we have to commit to, putting in the work to get there. We need to learn how to challenge our racist thoughts and the way we were taught to think about Indigenous people, and it ultimately is our responsibility to be better in this relationship. You could tell that she was shocked to find out that she has a role in this personally. I shared that it was our education system that got us into these ways of knowing Indigenous people, and it's our work as teachers, and we have a huge responsibility as we are part of the system that has the opportunity to impact the future and help working towards fixing it. This conversation showed me how little truth is still known about residential schools and the TRC. Many Canadians still see this as not their problem and see it as a problem of the past, and do not understand that we all have a role in understanding and working towards rebuilding those relationships. I think the most alarming part of all is looking at how much of an impact education needs to have on this, and yet so many teachers still have very little knowledge of these truths and understanding and how this needs to impact their teaching. There needs to be urgency in this, and without understanding, there cannot be urgency. Curriculum needs to be changed to address and support teachers on their understanding and their role in working towards reconciliation. There is no getting over this. There's no closing this chapter. We have to work towards understanding and rebuilding these relationships. I now recognize more than ever that I need to be an advocate for indigenizing education in my school. Like some of my fellow teachers who have inspired me through their work, I hope that I can continue to have these conversations and spark interest in others. It is evident that we still have so much work to do.